you believe that any of the growing political unrest around the world, especially Tunisia and Egypt, is linked to higher food prices, which the questioner says results from the Fed's large-scale asset purchases?
I'm not sure I accept the premise of the first half of the question.
It's not just Egypt. We're seeing it in Algeria, Tunisia, Jordan, Yemen. The list goes on. All countries with something very critical in common. The people are being strangled by soaring food costs now at their highest levels ever. Coupled with high unemployment, the cost of food has been the uniting force of revolt. For the lucky Arabs who actually have a job, it's estimated they spend up to 80% of their income on food. And guess who's behind the price spikes? Washington, Wall Street, and China. And while China is the hardest for us to control, we can deal with the two-headed beast that is Washington and Wall Street. The short-term problem is on Wall Street. You see, for decades now, food suppliers and farmers have been signing contracts designed to lock in their prices for a predetermined later date. It's essentially a way to hedge their bets against sudden fluctuation in costs and prices. Speculators have always been a key reason why this system works. They pump money into it. But you know the mantra, everything in moderation. Too much speculation distorts food prices. You've heard of the dot-com bubble and the housing bubble. Let's call this one the food bubble. The number of people going hungry is rising on the earth for the first time in history. Food prices predicted to jump another 20% this year. And as the bubble squeezes our world's poorest, it is releasing torrents of anger and frustration, people blaming their governments for the results of this rampant speculation. But the biggest blame does not lie on Wall Street. The most sinister driver of exploding global food prices is in the hallowed halls of our central government, hell-bent on covering up 2008's massive megabank theft. The Federal Reserve's answer to cover up that theft was to turn on the money printing machine in overdrive, creating trillions of new dollars on their computers, pumping them into our economy to cover up the bank's losses. The consequence, lowering the value of our currency. And as we continue to do that, investors and non-investors alike are watching commodity prices soar in correlation to that money printing. Corn, wheat, copper, oil, you name it. And it's not just in those other countries. So whether you're cursing food and gas prices at home this summer and wondering why, or you're a stunned observer of the unrest in the Middle East, realize both are the direct result of a pay cut from money printing as your government remains hell-bent on propping up the mega banks.
And to further help us connect the dots, I want to bring in Bill Fleckenstein, hedge fund manager, investor based in Seattle, somebody expert on all of these variables. Bill, and how closely does the money printing policies of our central bank correlate to the overall rise in commodity prices?
I think it correlates quite well, but not precisely. And it's the not precisely part, I think, that often confuses people because people will say, well, why should printing money necessarily cause food prices to go up? And that is the problem with printing money. When you create money out of thin air, you don't know where it will go. We saw it go into stocks in the stock bubble. We saw it go into real estate in the real estate bubble, and now it's going into commodities and other things. But what it does is it turns the average person into a speculator. It's not just speculation in the futures markets. There have been stories in all the papers about how farmers in China holding back their cotton crop to businessmen who make cotton shirts buying in advance. When people believe that the money will no longer be good, they put it into things. And when those things are food and you have crop disruptions, then you start to see what's happening, and then you get the dominoes start to tip over like we're seeing now.
And I want to talk about our own dominoes and the relationship between America's mega banks, the political contribution system, where 40% of the political donations for both Republicans and Democrats come from the banks. So you have the giant banks as the bulk provider of money for politicians. You have the implicit and explicit support of the central government, both through tax code and money printing. You then get what you just described, the new money going someplace, in this case into a food bubble. and then the food bubble has this impact on the poorest nations, where, as we just reported, 80% of their income goes to food, which is inconceivable to Americans. Just how sinister is that wheel between the banks, the political contributions, the support, soaring prices, and the unrest?
Well, it's extremely unfortunate, but it's how interests get aligned, because the groups of people that you mentioned who actually might be benefit from all this money printing, Wall Street banksters and all these other folks, they have lots of money and they do things with it and they get more money. It's the people that don't have any money that get pressured, and unfortunately they don't have a heck of a lot of clout. So money printing and the things that are done by our central bank and other central banks in the name of suppressing prices that are too low, i.e. fighting deflation, have now seen their unintended consequences in screaming agricultural and commodity prices and related prices. Because when psychology starts to change, then people modify their behavior and it gets into the other sorts of prices. And it's all because we have a central bank that won't ever face its mistakes and always wants to print money to solve whatever the problem is.
As more and more people in this country come to understand something that you've known and understood for years, something that many folks have been rapidly getting educated on since the financial crisis, what is the alternative, or what are some of the alternatives that could be entertained today instead of the money printing strategy that we're getting from our government now?
Well, I know this will probably make a lot of people laugh, but when we were on a gold standard, there's nothing magical about gold. It was just a rule as to how much money you could create. And it had an elegant check and balance, because if you were a country that was doing things that the world thought improper from a monetary standpoint, gold left your country and you had to then tighten. So I know it sounds like I want to go back to Stone Age times when I mentioned the gold standard, but we need rules whereby the money is fixed in value and other things fluctuate. We have tried to make it so the economy and other things don't fluctuate, and we've turned money into being worthless.
The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says global food prices are likely to rise even higher after hitting records in January, and this raises concern for many countries.
Global food prices rose in January at a record high. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization said on Thursday that food prices went above 2008 peaks when rising food prices sparked riots. Many countries could be affected by food price inflation, and some don't expect the food price hike to ease for some time.
The issue that concerns is that the duration of this price increase, which has started so many months ago and not really giving us any indication that it's going to change dramatically in the future, coming months, is long. And this long duration is something that I think eventually would mean more food inflation in many countries.
Up for the 7th month in a row, the index was the highest since records began in 1990 and topped in June 2008 during the food crisis of 2007-2008. Surging food prices have fueled protests that toppled Tunisia's president in January and have spilled over to Egypt and Jordan. Severe drought in the Black Sea last year, heavy rains in Australia, and dry weather in Argentina, and anticipation of the spike in demand after unrest in North Africa and the Middle East has caused grain prices to rise steeply. High food prices are of major concern, especially for countries that face problems in financing food imports and for poor households which spend a large share of their income on food.
As you probably know, riots and political unrest have come to many countries across the world. We've seen dictatorships in Tunisia and Egypt fall. And we're seeing unrest from Iran to Libya and many countries in between. But many probably did not realize that these uprisings were caused in part by high food prices.
Gaining access to the developing world's demand for food. The latest international survey on food prices reveals an extra 44 million people have been forced to the brink of poverty because of soaring food prices.
Once again, rising food prices are causing social unrest and political instability in several countries.
Hello, I'm Joe Donlin.
And I'm Tracy Berry. First at 6 tonight, get ready to pay double, maybe even triple the price for fresh produce in the coming weeks. The worst freeze in 60 years has decimated crops in Mexico and the southwestern U.S.
Yeah, not only these prices skyrocketing, there is a very good chance that supplies of items like these Roma tomatoes and asparagus might not be available at any price, at least for a while.
What's going on with produce prices?
We've had to double and triple, and the consumer comes in here and looks at the price. It's a little shock to them.
Farmers throughout northern Mexico and the southwestern U.S. experienced unprecedented crop losses. Now devastation that seems so far away is impacting all of us. Roma tomatoes have more than doubled in price since Thursday. Zucchini has tripled. The situation is so dire, some stores can't honor certain advertised prices, which were ordered in newspapers long before the freeze.
And now I'm in a situation where I can't really support that ad. And I try to do the best I can as far as letting my consumer know what's going on in the market.
I've never seen this happen. I've been in the business for 25, 26 years.
The World Food Program says that civil protests like the ones in Egypt over the past couple weeks are partly driven by growing anxiety about access to food and prices. The era of food volatility seems to be rippling across the globe, and on the floor of the CME Group in Chicago, commodities traders are dealing with a continued price rise in products such as grain.
Food prices are escalating at a very large rate. We could see that actually you're going to see a lot of demand come back in.
The increase in those prices have had wide-range impact, and global demand for wheat, sugar, pork, and beef is at unprecedented levels. On this snowy hog farm in northern Illinois, producers are preparing for record-high pork prices this summer. More profit on the farm, but clearly the consumers will be paying more at the store.
Anything with wheat product, the pasta, the sugar, the baking products, milk, eggs, butter, staple type items, those are the items that are getting impacted.
The lag time from the commodities price to the grocery store is sometimes as long as 10 months. Consumers may not feel the strain immediately, but as 2011 progresses, food inflation will hit the wallets of people around the world.
Fox News alert on the world food supplies. We have been tracking this story for a few days now, and it is getting quite some attention. Food supplies getting very tight. And on the commodity markets, food prices soaring to levels never before seen. It's been gradually showing up in our supermarkets, and you're going to pay for it in your pocketbook, which could lead to social, political instability, geopolitical conflict, and irreparable environmental damage. I mean, this is something that could affect us on many levels.
Not could, will affect us. You see this, I'm holding up rice right here, because in 2008, when oil went to $147 a barrel, rice prices spiked to $25 per 100 metric tons. They're right now around 20. If we were to see that again last time, the food riots that you saw on the side of the screen a little while ago.
It could be a case of sticker shock when you go food shopping in the coming months. The USDA has cut its estimates for global harvests of key crops and then raised demand forecasts. So all this reaffirming concerns of what we already know, rising food prices in our future. So